though they could have had the same that the Essenes had. I mean, it's like when you're presented with the gospel, it's pretty straightforward. There's no, hidden agenda. There's no, you don't need to be. And this is the interesting thing I think about the book of Romans, which is like, this incredible theological treatise by Paul. But he wasn't talking to theologians, he was talking to believers in Rome, and that he would think that they obviously could understand what he was saying, and so can we, but it's not just, and I know that's not what you're saying, that, the Sadducees and the Pharisees had a lack of information that the Essenes had, but they
had that information.
they just rejected it.
Yeah, they refused to acknowledge it, basically.
But that's what I want to touch on, is why were they motivated? You began to speak on that, And what is that element? That knowing that there is a God, knowing that there is reality of his existence, and you repudiate him, you refuse him. Because I'm reading the same thing in 2 Kings, I'm reading the same thing in Revelation 11.
Well, consider this too, that Jesus said, he called out to Jerusalem,
Wow.
and he said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that stonest the prophets, you killed the prophets. They tried to tell you, and you killed them. So they were rebellious, they were proud, they were stubborn, stiff-necked, okay? You're stiff-necked rebels. Here you're rebels. Moses. Here you're rebels. So all the way through they were. But think of this now. Think of this. Israel was certainly like that. But the human heart is just the same today. And the Gentiles. It's just the same. Stiff-necked, won't listen, blind. It's blind. There is a blindness that Paul talked about in 2 Corinthians
3.
2 Corinthians 3, he said
The veil.
the God of this world. He said the God of this world
It's blinded,
has
that's
blinded the minds
4,
of them
verse
which
4.
believe not. They're blinded.
Yeah.
So, and then it says that there's another one. In whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ should shine through them. So here we have Satan who hates. What he hates is the manifestation of Christ through people. But the gospel, when someone hears the gospel, by the way, it is the greatest cause. The gospel is the greatest cause, not global warming, not LGBTQ, whatever, not Black Lives Matter. The gospel is the greatest cause.
Did you hear that blasphemy? Did you hear that?
Yeah, and the greatest
Blasphemy.
solution, right?
Nothing. Humanism. It's what man tries to produce.
Yeah.
Every one of them are going to hell.
Even if it's civilized in its
As good
presentation.
as it sounds, they can make it sound like it.
Yeah.
It will go into hell. It's only the gospel delivers people.
Most people would not think that Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom, was a bad town to live in, except at nighttime. And then you just went home. You weren't going to be out,
Not true.
sodomizing.
Well,
You just went home.
Well, they were, it was like high society.
What?
They were like high society.
Hi.
Yeah. High society. Maybe, I don't know about that high, but
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, they were highfalutin, artistic,
educated.
educated.
Yeah.
It was not all bad side of the
Sounds
tree
like
of knowledge.
America to me.
I've heard America called more numerous times
Belly of the beast.
the spiritual nature. The nature.
Well, I heard, go ahead, I know you got something.
The whole issue with, one of the big reasons why the captivity took place, 2 Chronicles 36, verse 20 and 21, says, "Those who had escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and to his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths."
Wow.
All the days of the desolation it kept Sabbath until 70 years were complete. So what he's saying is that there were 490 years where the nation of Israel did not keep the Sabbath year. And as a result, the land owed that 70 years back to God. And because they weren't willing to give it, he's taken it. And he took it by basically removing them completely from there. So now the nation of Israel is, when they come back from captivity, they're wondering, what do we do so that this doesn't happen again? Well, let's create a whole bunch of laws that are man-made. They're more severe than the law of Moses, and enforce those as if they were the law of Moses, so that even if man breaks man's law, they haven't broken God's law. So we're not going to end up back in captivity. So it was called the fence. I want to build a fence around the law of Moses, so that even though you're breaking man's laws, you haven't broken God's law yet, so he's going to leave us alone. And that was the strategy behind the whole thing.
What a plan.
And the Pharisees, particularly the Pharisees, were they were the administrators.
They were the
of that.
fence keepers, yeah.
That's right. And this is why Jesus took them on and basically said, you're treating these laws as if they came from God, but all you're doing is you're creating more. When you proselytize somebody, they're becoming more like hell than you are.
Yeah.
Matthew 23. So all they were doing was trying to maintain control over the people in their own religious system, without acknowledging that but the better plan was let Jesus come, let the Messiah come and solve this problem of sin, and let us enter into a brand new covenant relationship with God, which is far superior than the old one.
Do you see any parallelism between that and Trump trying to drain the swamp?
Well, I mean,
Their
it's
hatred for Trump. They're trying to destroy him because he threatens
Persecution. Persecution has a formula, and it can be seen throughout history. That card gets played. So, you want to destroy the messenger because you don't like the message. The message is what you're after, but you can't get that. And in the case of God, I was just thinking, interestingly, that, yeah, exactly, what you were saying, Pastor, was spot on. Let's fast forward to today, and why is it that, Israel, as we would understand it, the nation of Israel, is operating on what premise? I mean, so you have
it's the
this,
same principle. Rabbinical Judaism is the rule of the day, and part of that is the enforcement of the oral law. That has not changed in
Okay.
2,000 years.
but they lost the temple and they lost the sacrificing,
Right.
associated with that. So their obedience is partial. I mean, if they wanted to, that's why they want to get the temple
Well,
back.
part of the problem, in 75 AD, the Jews held a council of Yavne, And at that council, a number of things were determined. Number one, they decided that the Christian was no longer allowed in the temple, in the synagogue. Another decision was made that the temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed 5 years earlier, 70 AD, and they decided at that point, we are not going to rebuild the temple. So therefore, there won't be any more animal sacrifices. Instead, we're changing the program so that it's now about good works. Good works has taken the place of the sacrificial system as really the center point of Jewish life. So now they're all about this, and the other decision was made in the Old Testament scriptures at that time as well.
And I wonder if there's parallels between that and what's happened with Catholicism.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the Council of
Oh, yeah.
Trent.
Oh, yeah, no question.
I saw, and I watched half of it, I couldn't deal with it anymore, but John MacArthur talking about, are Catholics saved? You know,
can you
or
say
are they someone that needs to be evangelized? Are they a group that needs to be evangelized? And I don't know. To me, like, to know someone's heart, is it us for us to decide?
Yeah, that's, the issue is he's judging people by doing that, by
Yeah.
saying that when you generalize, I mean, there are believers in every church.
Yeah.
No matter what they stand for. There are believers, I think, in in Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
Every religious expression, somewhere in there's a believer in Christ. They're just not aware of it. They don't realize it. So,
But I'm a
so-
humanist.
So to throw the whole system itself is
Corrupted.
is
and-
corrupt because it's
Right.
man driven.
Right.
And, if the moment you start to believe that the Pope is infallible and can make no wrong decision,
Right.
that everything he says
Ex cathedra.
is completely true, you've now opened the door for that man-made system to control everything about people's lives. And this is one of the reasons why the Protestant Reformation was such a profound time.
And wasn't the Council of Trent, wasn't that in response to the heretics, as they call them, Calvin and, I forget the other one, John
Knox,
yeah.
Calvin.
So wasn't the Council of Trent, like, say, because I know that a couple of the things they said was, anybody that's preaching grace alone is a heretic. You know?
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
The persecution that came from what we embrace as, sola scripture.
Right.
We today, and it begs the question, well, that begs the question, but I've thought of this question, do we need another Reformation? It's been
Does the
500
Reformation need a
years.
Reformation? I've said
Yeah.
that.
Of course we do. Yes, we
Reformation
do.
needs a Reformation.
But
Two
is that
things.
different from a revival?
Well, listen to this about what you just saying. I just heard this. This is Pastor Anderson.
I'm sorry?
Pastor Anderson. posted
Eric
this.
Anderson?
Eric Anderson.
Oh, okay.
posted this.
Yeah.
Just recently, 200 men from Gaza recently got saved in Gaza. All of them having dreams about Jesus.
Okay.
Jesus appearing to them in dreams.
I'm sure that's true. That's happening all over the place.
That's revival. I mean, we're seeing it now. Now the Lord said concerning Israel, He said this prophecy is just astonishing. You will be hated by all nations because of me. You will be hated. So we fast forward into now, but there's fast forward and then there's forward looking. In spite of everything that's happening now that we fast forward into, forward looking is, in spite of everything, Israel gets restored.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a promise.
In spite of everything, it's like
And if Israel gets destroyed,
restored.
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 Israel doesn't get destroyed.
I'm sorry.
No, I
You're
just-
looking
that's
at
what
me
I
funny.
heard,
Yeah,
destroyed.
you're looking at me funny, so like,
I-
I'm glad
That's in his
glad
frame
you
of
said
reference.
that.
Yeah.
But Israel gets restored in spite of everything that's happening now and everything we're about to see. I don't know. I mean, it's like, it blows your mind.
The mercies of God and
Oh,
the covenants, because I was just, what was it, Second Kings, that's where we're coming out of for the men's conference, Second Kings, that God didn't abandon Israel because of his covenant, with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
And so
Still in
Israel,
effect.
who had the opportunity to repent, they didn't. They were given the opportunity. And this is the thing I think about the gospel, is that it's not magical in the sense, you present it to somebody, oh yes, of course, and I see it and I thank you very much. But it's presented in clarity and in truth, with the understanding that in its rejection, look at what you're left with. Okay? Let's just consider
Right,
that,
right.
If you're going to reject what God is offering, and in the midst of, and this is what you're bringing out, in the midst of judgment because of rejection, the arm of the Lord is extended still. Like grace is still there, available. And in our minds, it's like, kind of paradoxical. We're thinking like, go God, go get him, or he's absolutely merciful to everybody. See, we hear this today, oh
Right.
God, the love of God, it's
Universal
everybody.
salvation, yeah.
Exactly. And so this is very interesting, in as much as that people have to, and I think that the sad thing, like the fact that there are going to be folks in Gaza getting saved, why not? What have they done to exclude themselves from such a salvation, so great a salvation? But the narrative today is wanting to force people to take a side.
oh, you're not going to hear that on TV.
No, you're not.
But when you hear it, you go, that's God.
That's
Yeah,
the-
and it doesn't fit the narrative, does it?
No,
Like
it
what you're
doesn't.
talking
It
about. It
doesn't.
has nothing to do with politics. It's,
Absolutely not. It's just, yeah, it's otherworldly.
Yeah,
It's otherworldly.
most of them are not familiar, not aware of the history of Jewish nation. They don't really understand. They hear these accusations that somehow they are occupiers. No, they are not occupiers. First off, all of that land was originally given to them in 1948 as part of the settlement after World War II, of where they were going to occupy their land and be free from all of the other Arab countries that surrounded them. The day after, literally the day after May 14th, 1948, 5 nations around them declared war on Israel. And they've been dealing with that environment since that time.
The
And
animosity is ancient. The animosity didn't
well,
just happen
it goes
overnight.
back to Ishmael
It's ancient,
and Isaac. Anyway. But the bigger picture though is that God's not done with Israel, even though they rejected the Messiah. In fact, I think He's more intensely after them now than ever before, because we're getting close to the tribulation, and God's heart is He doesn't want to see His people go through the tribulation. So He's intensifying, I believe, the effort to reach them. We see a number of notable rabbis from Israel getting saved. And this is part of the program that God is intensifying, because He doesn't want to see anybody suffer.
Well, you know, the
But
fact
they have to
that
make the choice for
they
themselves.
do have to make the choice, and they do. It's like Nicodemus, you know, got a one-on-one with Jesus. How many people get a one-on-one with the Lord, you know? And so there was the declaration of the grounds for salvation given to him, but it's given to us because we're reading that account. But yeah, I believe in, you know, just like in Gaza, you know, that there are people that are getting saved and not in the conventional sense that we would think salvation, you know, like, you know, do you confess with your mouth? You know, have you been baptized? You know, see, this is why I think we need a reformation, because we've added many other things along with,
Right.
you know, just believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved.
Yeah, well, right from the get-go, the Reformation was an awesome happening. It was an awesome
I mean, it took some time,
But,
though.
but almost immediately, there started to be church splits and schisms and Protestantism, Methodism, isms, and all the isms started, you know. And then there was a fractured. It wasn't. The Reformation was great, but it didn't end up being. But yet, underneath it all, there's still one body. Still one body, one remnant throughout. Like you were saying, there's saved people and all these isms.
Yeah.
There's Christian people because they trust Christ.
Yeah.
Jesus
How
Christ
did
is
you
saved by the
get
grace
saved?
of God.
God came to me in a dream.
They're in Catholic churches,
Yeah.
they're in Methodist churches, they're in Baptist churches, Lutheran, so forth.
Yeah, there are a number of testimonies of Jews and Muslims having these dreams of Jesus, literally Jesus appearing to them, visions and dreams,
We have one in
where
our
he's
church.
challenging
We
them.
have one
Yeah.
in Baltimore, our Fruits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our Fruits is from my
And one in Haverty Grace. Yeah. Well, I thought this was interesting. We talked about this before, where going to the gas chambers, it was heard Jewish people sing it's called the Ana Maham, and the words are, I believe with a full heart in the coming of the Messiah, and even though he may tarry, I will wait for him on any day that he may come. In the concentration camps, it is reported that many Jews sang the Ana Maham while walking to the gas chamber. So, to your point, God always wondered that. Well, we know the children were saved, right? But I always wondered that at the last moment did Christ appear, you know, and they saw, not by intellect, but by revelation.
Well, we don't think that salvation is by grace. We think it's based on merit,
Yeah.
human viewpoint.
Yeah.
So it's not fair. Like those same people might say, I don't believe in deathbed conversions. Because, I mean, you know, you mean to tell me that somebody could, you know,
So what do you do with the thief on the cross?
a long life of flagrant sin, and then at the last moment they get saved and they get to go to heaven? That's not fair.
Yeah.
But God didn't say he was in the fair business. He's in the just business.
He's just like Pastor Ray was saying, he's not willing that any should perish. Not just the tribulation, beyond the tribulation. Hell is a long time.
Hell is a long time.
Hell is a long time.
Eternity's
It's forever.
eternity's a long time
There's no
too.
second chance out of there. There's no second chance.
Yeah,
So
talk to the rich man about that.
Willing.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the character, and we're talking about the character and nature of the Creator. Not willing that any should perish. So he had a plan so that all could be redeemed. His plan was for every person to be redeemed.
Something interesting that you said, Pastor Bill, and I saw Pastor Ben posted this clip, and it was someone who was at that concert, I guess it was,
Right.
festival,
Yes.
Right.
It was
young
a-
guy. You've seen it?
I haven't seen that
Oh,
particular
oh.
video, but he was at, that was the October 7th thing
Right.
where
And-
many of them
and he
got
escaped.
sacrificed.
you know, but he gives his testimony of like, you know, God visiting him, you know, and I mean, now, he was, you know, a young 20, you know, prior to 30 years of age, Israelite who was totally humanized, you know, colored hair, tats, the whole thing, drugs, the whole thing. See, that's out there.
Right.
Secular.
Secularization, but not, you know, not even on the intellectual side, you know, where, you know, your son and daughter goes to Tel Aviv University and that's all fine. But no, the woke agenda.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that is kind of also very interesting because that agenda embraces the, you know, LGBTQ, Lives Matter, you know, love is love, you know, love is love. You know, that
My body, my
that-
choice.
Yeah, that whole system of thinking, and so he got saved because of that occurrence. That triggered. That was enough to trigger him to like look to the God that he had marginalized up to that point, or he had himself as the deity. You know, he was the determiner of his own destiny.
Well, how many, you know, I hear only 10% of Jews living in Israel are Orthodox.
Now, when you
Everybody
say
else,
Orthodox, can you please
they're not
define-
religious, basically religious Jews.
Okay.
You've got conservative and reformed, but they're just more, they're still playing church, if you will.
Yeah.
With only the Orthodox ones are what you might consider religious, Hasidic,
Hasidic, okay.
and the rest of them are Jews by nationality,
Right.
by culture, if
Right,
you will.
right.
And so all of these religious practices are all like, you know, lighting a Christmas tree is to America, as you know, has the same value as that. So it's not, there's no religious implication involved here.
No relationship.
And so, you know, we're dealing with a nation there that is, you know, heavily, you know, non-religious, and some of them even against God, you know, because until maybe an event like that takes place, and you know, where they're looking at, really, they're looking at evil,
Yeah.
and now they say, oh,
Yeah.
this is, oh,
Who will
there's
protect
a
me?
spiritual thing here going on that is bigger than me.
Right.
And now I'm seeing it for the first time, potentially, and I got to take some action here.
Well, what this young guy, you know, was confessing was, you know, the terrorism factor is quite interesting because they've you know, they've co-opted that in their existence. Every Jewish home has a safe room. Just like you have a basement, or you know, in other words, it's a place to go when stuff, you know, hits the fan, and they live with that every single day. They live with the realization that, you know, a missile could come, you know, some kind of terrorist act. Okay, so then it happens. It happens, and what you realize is that your safe room is not going to save you. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize that, but that's. Whatever I would think would come to my rescue doesn't. So here in the West, we think, you know, well, FEMA or the government or, you know, like Social Security or,
My rich relative.
you know, retirement, whatever we attach. And these are idols. These are things that we say, we affirm and acknowledge, but we're giving them more credence than they could ever deliver.
Isn't that exactly what the Saul of Tarsus did? Was that he was acknowledging, no, the law of Moses is God. Therefore, we must defend it as if it is God, even though God, you know, Jesus came to fulfill the law and introduce a new relationship with God. So that, but he basically had idolized the the law of Moses to the point where, no, this is God.
Well, if he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, then he was like what you were saying earlier. He was guarding the fence.
Yeah, he was going to defend it to the death. And
But
that
the
was,
fence wasn't the law of Moses. It was, the 613.
yeah, it's that whole system, the Torah.
Yeah.
And I was watching a message, a couple of messages by John Piper. You know who John Piper is? And he's really heavy into, he's a Calvinist, maybe not in the strict John Calvin sense, but he's a Calvinist. And, he is so preoccupied with grace, sovereign grace. I see him kind of in the same way, that he has made the grace of God his idol. And if you once you elevate anything above the person of God, you have created an idol for yourself. And God's going to come against
Why do
you.
you listen to him then? You shouldn't listen to him.
I was listening to it. I was encouraged by a guy who I respect.
You're sitting across from him right now.
Who said, hey, watch this. He wanted me to watch this after I told him what I was doing. I was writing another book, and so he said, well, here, listen to these things.
It's interesting. John Piper, maybe 40 years ago, we could say he was an iconic Calvinist. And he probably was, because that was the school he was brought up into. But what happens is that you begin to realize that it's not that box. It's convenient to keep the box because that's what you understand. That I can understand the box. Pharisee, Sadducee, whatever the case may be. But then if you're after God, then you'll begin to consider things outside of your theological box, which is not heresy or humanism, because those things even within the context of your box. But he's growing, and I would tend to think that I believe that he probably believes more like we believe, in as much as the things that I've heard him saying. He went to a Christian psychologist, a Christian. It's like a group, a union group, and he began to speak, and his audience began to laugh at him. But he was proclaiming something that was authoritatively truthful. And in essence, they couldn't.
Sign him up.
There are people today who, so they're not Protestant, they're not Baptist, they're not Methodist, they're not Catholic, they're not, they're believers.
They're born from above.
Yeah, they're believers, and they've been regenerated.
Yeah.
And they're following along,
It's near Harvard Yard.
There
Yes.
is no,
That's a little grace.
there are no atheists in foxholes.
yeah.
What they say.
And so even that, and through trials and tribulations, people get saved by the grace of God when they're under the worst conditions. but may never walk with God again. Oh God, if you get me out of this, I will serve you for the rest of my life. And then you get out, He gets you out of it, and you get saved and trust God, and then you don't do anything. But think of the great tribulation.
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
The great tribulation. How many people will be martyred? There was a number that could not be numbered. When the angel showed John a vision, he said there was a number that could not be numbered.
Revelation
What was numbered was a 200 million man army. That was numbered. Right. But this one couldn't even number. A sea of people.
Yeah.
Couldn't even be numbered. And so they're martyrs because they trusted Christ. They trusted Christ and they got saved. There's going to be gazillions of people going to get saved.
Gazillions?
Yeah, gazillions.
You know what's
And I heard the
interesting?
number of those, okay, this
Yeah,
is
those are-
144,000.
That's Israel. Yeah, they're going to preach the
And
gospel.
after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could count, Revelation 7:9, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands, and they cry out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb.
That's revival. And that's my picture. In my mind, that's the picture of revival.
That was what was supposed to happen at the triumphal entry of Jesus Christ. When he first came into town, but they rejected
Yeah, but
him.
he was confronting a religious system, which was, most of those people that were crying out. I've read this in two or three sources. Those were actually hired guns. They were- The ones that we were saying crucify him, they had been hired by the Pharisees to create this crowd in front in order to make sure that the outcome they wanted did actually take place.
George Soros.
So it was not a grassroots kind of thing. You know?
You
So
talking
it
about
was-
on Palm Sunday or when they were crucified?
when they asked him to crucify.
And people follow that
They said
narrative.
crucify him. That was on
So
Good
a
Friday.
small percentage of those who really do believe what they proclaim themselves to believe in, but they are hired guns, as was said, to convince them, this movement or this wokeness is pervasive. Everybody believes in it.
Well, you know what's
Or the
interesting
Helen
about
Hayes
that
basket.
is
That's why John said, believe not every spirit.
in Genesis 3 where Satan says to Eve, you shall be like God, right? Well, nowadays, that's what it's all about.
The big
That's
lie.
what it's all about. I decide what's right and wrong for me. I'm like God. So in that sense, I decide what's right and wrong for me. But when you were talking about no atheist in foxholes, when they come up against their mortality, they realize
Change it
that
to him real quick.
I am not like God. I am
Change it to him
scared
real
of